Hello and welcome. This is the deep dive video for Not Dead Enough. And this book differs a little bit from most of them because it plays in a rather short span of time and it's really detailed, really complex. When it comes to police procedural novels, this is a very good example for one, and we're going to be discussing this side of it in a different video because I will return to this book at a later point, but I'll mention this within this deep dive video too. So yet I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get into it. Darkness took a long time to arrive, but it was worth the wait. And besides, time was not a problem for him. Time, he had come to realize, was one of the things you had plenty of in life when you have little else. He was time rich, near on a time billionaire. Shortly before midnight, the woman he was following turned off the dual carriageway and drove into the lonely glow of a BP filling station forecourt. He halted his stolen van in an unlit slip road, fixating on her brake lights. They seemed to be getting brighter as he watched them, glowing red for danger, red for luck, red for sex. It's late night, and Katie Bishop is filling up her car in a fueling station. As she's pumping the gas, she's lamenting over her husband Brian, who's getting ever stranger, picking up new habits. His OCD seems to be kicking in, and he's getting kinkier and cruder, all in all. As she finishes filling up the car, she puts the pump back, goes into the shop, pays for the fuel, comes back out, gets into the BMW she drives, starts the engine, and drives off the forecourt. Suddenly a shape emerges behind her, with a knife in his hand, put to her throat, instructing her to drive on. Roy Grace, at home, is drinking whiskey, watching an old film on the DVD, and someone knocks on his door. He's surprised. Who could it be, late night like that? He goes to answer the door, opens it up, and it's Glenn Branson. He's crying. He ushers his friend in, asking what's wrong, what's going on. He looks like a broken man. And it turns out Glenn Branson got thrown out by his wife, Ari, from the house they live. So they sit down to chat and have a good drink overnight. Grace hears out his friend and colleague, and Glenn tells about Ari, how their marriage has been getting worse over the last months, and they chat through the night drinking. In a different part of Brighton, early morning finds the character Skunk waking up in a ragged motorhome. He's a drug addict and lives on all sorts of nuisance businesses and criminal deeds, from pickpocketing to shoplifting. Anything goes. He calls Brighton the town, his office, that's where he works, and as most drug addicts do, he would do anything for the next fix, though he's quite operational, functional, and on his side job, he's getting orders occasionally about cars to be stolen because he's a great car thief. After the night drinking and only just a few hours sleep, Roy Grace's phone rings. He gets to it, answers it, and it's a murder call. After what happened to Glenn Branson, even though he's on sick leave for another week after the bullet wound he suffered, he wakes him up and figures that, considering what happens in his marriage, it would help him to concentrate on something else. So he drags him into this investigation and tells Glenn to get ready. They're going to have to start working just about now. Hungover, but they get to a case which we'll find out quite intriguing. A different part of town, early in the morning as well, Brian Bishop is playing golf. He's interrupted by two detectives. As he approaches them, we learn that the detectives are Glenn Branson and Nick Nicol, and they came with sad news. The two detectives tell Brian that his wife was found dead in their home on Dyke Road Avenue. Sophia Harrington is 27 years of age. She works in the movie business. All her life she wanted to, and she kind of achieved it. She's revising, she's looking at the script while traveling on the tube to her office, where she'd like to present this action flick script that they could make into a film. And she has good feelings about it, she likes the script. She senses that some creepo keeps glancing at her in the tube carriage, but shrugs it off because she's actually in a very good mood. She has a lover now. She's madly in love with this man, and even texts him if they could meet up and things like that. The bloke being married, Sophie knows that, but she kind of has a buzz out of this whole situation. Anyhow, as she crosses the roads after getting off the tube, she gets to her office and gets down to business talking about the script. We get back to her a bit later. While Glenn Branson and Nick Nicol notify Brian Bishop about the demise of his wife, Roy Grace, of course, visits the crime scene on Dyke Road Avenue, the residence of the Bishops. There we find Joe Tyndall as a crime scene officer who's got just promoted. So he's now scientific crime scene officer. That means he can manage multiple crime scenes. And just a few months ago he was like a mad scientist. Now he's all shaped up recently with cool hip glasses, bald head and fancy clothing. And Roy Grace, dating again with Cleo, he kind of looks at him admiringly, thinking that yeah, he could do something with his shape as well. Puts these aside, he looks around the crime scene, sees these cars outside the house, obviously the Soko van, the police officers' cars, and there's the Jaguar of the Bishops and Katie's BMW convertible. As he looks around the crime scene inside, he sees Katie's body tied to the bed, a gas mask next to her, and we learned that the cleaning lady had found her and she did remove the gas mask from her face. Which makes the detective unhappy, of course. I mean, police don't like evidence to be tampered with, but that's not much they can do about it now, and it's obviously and understandably a kind of a reaction of someone in shock. He makes phone calls to assemble the team. One of the first calls he makes is to Norman Putting. He's going to be on his team for sure. And soon enough he assembles the cast of crew that he's going to investigate with, and once he gets back to the office he's going to open Operation Chameleon. Glenn Branson and Nick Nicol eventually take Brian Bishop downtown to the headquarters of the police, and they sit in with Roy Grace watching as well, formally interviewing Brian Bishop and inquire about his days and his relationship with Katie. We find out that Brian Bishop has a flat in London and the swanky house where he lives with his wife Katie on Dyke Road Avenue. He's a businessman into software engineering, a roaster software he's doing. And he's doing alright, his business is flying basically, he's a rich man. Hence he drives a Bentley Continental, a really expensive set of wheels. And eventually the police won't let him go back to his house, saying it's a crime scene, as the wife was found on the bed. So he's put in a hotel. Brian Bishop is put in a hotel that is going to have to be there for a few days until the CSI guys finish scrutinizing his house. The town billionaire is still following Sophie for days now. And in London Soho, he pops into this sex shop owned by Clive Wheeler. and inquires about the gas mask. And he's going to purchase it, already thinking about how he's going to look on Sophie. Sophie Harrington, while being watched by the time billionaire, makes a phone call to Brian, her lover, as she finds out what happened to the wife. And on a spur of the moment, she decides to leave work early and go home to Brighton and see if she can help Brian with just being there with company. And she goes to the train station, still being followed. Brian Bishop finds the conversation with Sophie really strange, because Sophie claims that they'd been together, like sexually, just recently. And Brian's not really sure how to react to it, because actually he'd never cheated his wife. And yes, he liked Sophie, they hung around, occasionally exchanged emails or phone calls, but they'd never been lovers. And that leaves Brian flabbergasted and quite anxious. Skunk, with the aid of his girlfriend, looked through the city all evening for an Audi A4 blue that's ordered to be stolen. Finally he finds it, manages to open the car, sends the girlfriend on her merry way. She drives this little Peugeot or something, and she gets sent away now that Skunk has found the car to be stolen, and he's about to sell it, generate some cash. So he gets in the car, manages to hotwire it, start it up and everything, and he drives off. As he's driving around, he's being followed by police. His two shadows are giving him a chase, but eventually Skunk manages to get rid of the tail. After the interview with Brian Bishop, Roy Grace assembles the team and opens Operation Chameleon. Roy Grace is the SIO, the Senior Investigation Officer. Glenn Branson, Nick Nicole, Norman Potting, Bella Moy, Alfonso Zaffaroni are part of the team, of course. Before the first briefing, they hold a press conference, and after the press conference, Roy Grace is waited upon by Kevin Spinello, the Argos journalist, and he stops him in the corridor, Spinello, and he tells Roy that he knows about the gas mask. Roy is flabbergasted. What does he mean, knowing about the gas mask? And Kevin Spinello says that he will not write it in the article, but he would like to have some favor in exchange. And Roy Grace reluctantly but agrees that Spinello will hold back this information now that the police didn't successfully do it. And later on, he sees what he can do if Spinello comes up with some sort of weird request. With this, fuming as well, Roy Grace leaves Spinello in the corridor after the press conference. As Roy is walking to the corridor, he gets a phone call, and it's Dick Pope, an old friend of his, an ex-police officer, and he's on holiday in Munich. And he says that he and the wife probably have seen Sandy, Roy's ex-wife. Suddenly Roy is thrown into a turmoil, thinking what he means. And they say that Sandy been spotted just over the lake where Pope and his wife were rowing in a boat, and she was in a beer garden having a beer. They tried waving her as the two persons, the couple, are friends of the Graces, but Sandy didn't seem responsive. By the time Dick Pope and the wife managed to get to the lake shore with the rowing boat, Sandy had been gone, and he just wanted to let Roy Grace know about it. And with this, Roy now decides that he's going to have to go to Munich and see if he can find any trace about Sandy after all these years. Friday the 4th, 6:30 p.m. That's the first briefing Roy Grace gives. Bella Moyes is tasked with supervising the liaison officers' investigation into the background of the bishops. Potting reports that all the computers and gadgets from the bishop's house have been seized and they are now being interrogated by Ray Peckham, who's the high-tech crime unit new person. Obviously what had transpired in the recent months, that basically had made some changes within the unit, the cyber cop unit, and at the moment we're going to have Ray Peckham doing all these with his team. Also Potting had found a message left on the bishop's phone, and it's just a guy saying, "See you later." But it is not Brian Bishop's voice. He met the gardener when he was coming around, and Potting asked him if he recognizes the voice, and the gardener confirmed that it wasn't Bishop's voice on the voicemail. Roy Grace gives him the action to keep an eye on the forensics of the computers and also try to see Katie's paths in the county, see where they can spot her, and he'll report about it later, so he gets onto it. In the autopsy, semen was found in Katie's vagina, and the semen is in the lab at the moment. It's being analyzed, but as it's a Friday, it's unlikely they're going to hear back till Monday, even a bit later. Zaffaroni suggests that they take samples from Brian Bishop so they can compare it to the semen, the DNA found in Katie, but obviously the team with Roy Grace in the lead is a step ahead of Zaffaroni, so it's already been done. Same goes for the phone record that Potting had already sent files to request from the phone companies, but again, phone companies don't really work in the weekends, so unfortunately there won't be no detailed logs coming back. And last but not least, Nick Nicol gets a call and learns that Brian's Bentley Continental had been caught near Gatwick by an ANPR, automatic number plate recognition system. That's an interesting lead. They're going to look at it. The evidences are mounting against Brian Bishop. Things don't look too good for him. Right about the time when the briefing draws to a close, Sophie Harrington has arrived to Brighton, tailed by the Time Billionaire. And the Time Billionaire is following her through the city. She calls Brian again, but Brian's reluctant to share too much info with her, and she becomes really uncertain if it was a good idea just to surprise Brian and seek his company, which normally was not the norm, as they had a set routine of being lovers. But she decides to wander around town and gather her thoughts with the Time Billionaire in tow. After a long day, tired and exhausted, Roy Grace goes to Cleo the usual late night date. But this time they have a bit of an argument because Roy Grace fibs to her about going to Munich. He claims that it's to some sort of police business. But Cleo sees through the lie and ends up giving Grace the silent treatment for a while. So this date hasn't gone too well. But Grace has a mental pressure about the sighting of his wife and is not really sure how to handle this situation. And he will go to Munich next day. That's the plan. Missing half a day or most of the day, passing on the senior investigating officer's roles to his deputy while he's gone, and hopes to hell that it won't make no waves around the boss's buildings like Alison Vosper, his boss, the ACC, and even more he hopes that no murder will happen connected to this case while he's gone. Later the night, Sophie Harrington, still restless, sitting in her Brighton flat, watching TV, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And there's a visitor, and this visitor is her lover Brian, with a box, a package, comes in through the door and insists she opens the package. Sophie finds it strange. There's no remarks or any sort of conversation regarding the dead wife and the whole turmoil, what Brian's supposed to be in. Eventually she opens the box and there's a gas mask in it. And before she knows, she gets attacked. And we won't find her alive. No more. A random couple walking down the seafront finds a dead body floating in the surf. Tamara and Ben. Ben walks into the water, almost gets dragged away by it, but still thinking it's some sort of strange item, an object that's being washed ashore. As he gets closer, he sees it's a body. Grabs the hand of the body, tries to pull it, and the hand comes loose, breaks off, tears off the body, and the girlfriend and himself, they freak out, but eventually drag the body out of the water and call the emergency services. Roy Grace goes to the Hotel du Vin, where Brian is, until his home is being forensically searched. And Linda Buckley, the liaison officer, sitting down in the lounge in the foyer of the hotel, keeping an eye on things. They have a little chit chat and go up to the room where Bishop's supposed to be, under a false name as well, because Linda Buckley didn't want his name to be in the register of the hotel, so the press couldn't get to him that easy. As they go into the room, knock on the room door, no answer. Eventually they get the hotel management to open the door, and they get into the room, and Bishop's gone. He's not there. Eventually Roy Grace will catch up with him and interview him, as he'll be found in the Lansdowne Place Hotel, which is not too far from Hotel du Vin. And his explanation of moving, when Grace finds him, they get him down to the police station and formally interview him, now with Grace present, asking questions with Branson. They record the interview. And the explanation Bishop gives, that a police officer called the room in Hotel du Vin and told him the taxi had been called and another room is arranged in another hotel for him. In short order, Grace learns that the name of the supposed officer, D.S. Canning, is non-existent in the entire Sussex force. While interviewing him, Grace asks Brian about the wound on his hand, and he claims that he got that as he slammed the taxi door on it while he was taken from the hotel to the other hotel. Roy tells the team about his encounter with Spinella and that the detail of the gas mask has been leaked. He's furious. Tells the team to be vigilant, and again swears he's gonna find who the leak is. It's the fourth briefing, August 5th, Saturday, 6:30 p.m. Potting reports he's checked the CCTV and found a stolen plumber's van abandoned 2 miles from Lewis, just on a slip road from the BP station where Katie Bishop filled up her car. He'd gone to the BP station, checked the CCTV that records 1 frame every 30 seconds, and Potting did identify Katie, last seen alive on the footage. And he went back to the Dyke Road residence of the Bishops and searched her car, the BMW, and Norman found a parking receipt, and it's come from a machine on South Street in Lewis. He's going to investigate it a bit closer. Roy tells Potting to keep on doing it, keep plodding. Zaffaroni reports about the events of Katie's day leading up to her death, and it completely tallies up with what Potting had found. And the personal trainer, the nail bar she went to do her nails, employees will have to be interviewed along with everyone she had encountered. Finally, Pamela Buckley, not Linda Buckley, even the police force confuses them sometimes, but they're 2 different female officers. Pamela Buckley tracked down the taxi driver, Mark Tuckwell, who had taken Brian from the Duvin Hotel to the Lansdowne Place Hotel. And as Brian said, that his wound on his hand caused by slamming the taxi door on it, Mark Tuckwell does not recall such an event. Clues are piling up against Brian Bishop. At the end of the briefing, Guy Batchelor, he's a new recruit as well, reports that he'd found a life insurance taken out on Katie by Brian Bishop. A life insurance for £3 million. With this, the briefing is over for now. Skunk is on a mission. He's got given orders to steal a car and to deliver it to a fence, if you'd like, who's got a garage, and they technically rogue car mechanics, and they dismantle and put together cars, selling them on the black market. Stolen vehicles, stolen parts, you name it, they're going to have these, and this team is one of those who Skunk does jobs sometime. But Skunk is being watched by 2 police officers. One he's familiar with, because Skunk had bitten his finger off once, the cop's finger, and they staked out on him, but they don't want to catch Skunk just yet. not really want to catch him because they want the big fish. So they follow him. And eventually they'll come to some sort of deal with Skunk. But we're going to check back with them later. Holly, a friend of Sophie Harrington, is trying to reach Sophie on the phone. Neither the landline, neither the cell phone, she gains any reply. She decides she's going to go to the party on her own and just hope that Sophie's going to turn up there. Eventually, it will not happen, and in the morning, going to phone the police to ask for a welfare check on her friend. An early morning flight takes Roy Grace to Germany. He arrives in Munich. He gets picked up by one of his buddies. He has international connections to other police forces because he used to go, or probably still does, to these international police meetings. So Roy meets up with Marcel Coulin, and after a little sightseeing around town and catch up, the German detective, the German police officer, takes him around Munich and takes him to this lake. Here we get a Sandy fake out for a spell. Roy thinks he's seeing Sandy, tries to chase up this woman, but eventually he realizes that that's not Sandy, though he snaps a photo and sending this to Dick Pope. He hopes he's gonna get an answer that that was the lady they mistaken Sandy with, but unfortunately eventually Pope will send back that no, it wasn't the woman. They are pretty sure they'd seen Sandy. But this chapter serves really to get us introduced to Marcel Coulin, about whom we're going to hear on and off in the other books. And obviously the Sandy trace didn't get any clearer. But while Roy is out in Germany, he receives a phone call from the team, a dreaded phone call, because the welfare check, asked in the morning by Holly, Sophia Harrington's friend, goes, checks her address, and they find her dead body with a gas mask on. And Branson tells Grace to get back to Brighton double quick because there's problems and another body. In the Royal Sussex County Hospital E&E unit, a strange man turns up and goes to the A&E department because of a wound on his hand, and it seems infected. He gets seen and patched up, but his thoughts are with all sorts of things about Cleo Morley's car, because he's ordering online the manuals and he has a surprise for Cleo. Roy Grace and Glenn Branson go and find out Bishop is having a lunch with the in-laws. So they go to the in-laws' house and ask Bishop to come with them. He's half released because he's never really good with his in-laws. Besides, they had to speak about funeral arrangements of Katie, so it wasn't like a good-natured meeting. And Bishop gets interviewed again by Grace and Glenn, but they don't learn any significant information. They notice the wound on his hand had been bandaged, but it just says that a nurse friend of him suggested it should be covered. Otherwise, we don't get no further information just yet. But the DNA samples of that wound will be given in to the lab for further comparisons, because they remember when Bishop changed the hotels, apparently for some bogus police call, which could be a lie, Grace considers, or could be someone faking a police call. But anyhow, keeping this in mind, some sample gets sent off to the lab, and late night Grace goes to Cleo's, as usual nowadays, especially that Glenn Branson sleeps at his place. He goes to Cleo, who's crying, really upset, and it turns out that her car, a blue MG, the rooftop, the soft top, got cut across with a knife or with a sharp instrument. And while it was parked front of the mortuary, so now they have this problem to deal with, and they wonder who could this be. Monday morning, Operation Chameleon and Minstrel get joined together. 8:30 a.m. 7th of August. It's a joint briefing because the two cases, Katie Bishop's and Sophie Harrington's murders, are investigated by two different teams. As yet, officially, they're only connected by the gas mask, but since all individual cases have to be investigated by different teams, Roy decides that he's going to join the two cases and brief both teams so they up to date with each other's information. Norman Potting reports that he tracked down an artist, Barty Chancellor, and he's the lover of Catherine Bishop. As he searched Catherine's BMW, he found the parking receipt, and the parking receipt was taken from Southover Street in Lewis. Further on, he pulled a favor from one of the tech guys in the police, and he had them come in on the weekend, and he looked into the phone of Katie Bishop, and the stored number was a Lewis number. Lo and behold, it was Barty's number. He popped up there, had a little chat, and Barty admitted they were lovers, and according to him, Sophie's marriage wasn't all that golden couple-ish thing most people are aware of. Anyhow, Barty's coming in for an interview just after the briefing for 10 a.m. Potting's pal, the phone guy, stayed a bit longer and did a favor for Guy Batchelor too, and Guy reports that the last number that's been dialed from Sophie Harrington's number was Brian Bishop's number. Joe Tyndall, now a crime scene manager, is reporting that Sophie Harrington's flat yielded some latent prints of a shoe that they managed to take after chemically enhancing it. The fingerprints are all eliminated, either belonging to Sophie or verified friends. The perpetrator probably wore gloves or wiped them all off. Also, under Sophie's toenail, they found skin fragments, and these are sent off to the lab for DNA comparison, and the semen lab results, Tyndall is waiting to hear back just in the afternoon. Pamela Buckley reports she's checked the hospitals, the Royal Sussex County Hospital in Brighton, the one in Eastbourne, in Worthing, and in Haywards Heath. But because of patient confidentiality, it's difficult to get information, but so far it yielded no clues about treatment of a hand that is consistent of the injuries Brian Bishop has. While Cleo is at the mortuary at work, her cleaning lady goes to her house, and she, Maria, meets this guy who's a meter reader. The guest meter reader guy bumps his way into Cleo's flat, Maria letting him in. And while Maria is distracted, this guy, we find out, is the time billionaire, takes a wax print of the keys that the cleaning lady has, and eventually fades away, leaving nobody the wiser that now he has keys to Cleo Morley's apartment. The autopsy of Miss Harrington, Sophie's autopsy, yields a strange clue, which is little drill marks that form a sentence in her back, and it says, "Because you love her." The lab results show that the DNA of Brian Bishop matches that of the semen found in Katie Bishop. One of Brian Bishop's alibis is that he had a dinner with a friend, a colleague of his, Phil Taylor, and Superintendent Grace and Glenn Branson will pay him a visit. So they drive all the way up to London to see this geezer. And he looks like a trustworthy fellow, and he confirms the alibi. The question remains though, if Brian Bishop could have done the meeting with the man, had a few drinks, get in his Bentley, tear down to Brighton, do the deed, turn around, get back to London, and say that he'd been sleeping and went to play golf next morning early. To test this, Roy decides to let Glenn Branson loose behind the wheel and tell him to drive as fast as he can to see if they could do it in the given time frame, because knowing that his license plate, Bishop's license plate, is clogged by the ANPR system, it kind of locks the timeline, and they want to see if it could have been done. And Branson drives like crazy, and he does it in time, give or take 5 minutes. So they decide it's time they arrest the man, because now his alibi is nullified, and they decide to charge him. So Nick Nicole and Glenn Branson go and arrest him. Skunk receives another order for another car to be stolen. Now, the last car he has stolen, and Paul Packer and Trevor Sellis, the two coppers who'd been following him, he managed to get rid of the tail. Skunk did. But in the meantime, the two cops kept watching him, and they never got to the main guy, Spiker, who orders these cars. Eventually, they managed to cut a deal with Skunk, and they agreed that for the next order, he is to notify the two cops, he's gonna get paid, he can buy his drugs or whatsoever, they're gonna arrest Spiker, and that will be the end of it. Skunk is looking forward to that, especially with this new order coming in, because last time he delivered an audio E4, Spiker was not happy, technically he ripped him off. But now he's all happy, his hopes are high that he's going to get some money, please these two cops as well, get them off his back, and Spiker's gonna go away. The little bastard thing. Yeah, Skunk is having this plan that his day is going to be cool. So he receives the order, which is for an MG. He's cruising around with his girlfriend and is looking for the target car, an MG, but he can't find one anywhere. Spends most of the day with it. And it seems that he's going to be spending some more hours, because normally it would be a common car around Brighton. Now he can't spot any. Normally he does the deep garages, the underground parking lots, shopping centres, wherever, but he had not found one yet, but he keeps looking. There's a gathering in one of the police offices near the briefing suite that Roy uses and his team, and all sorts of high brass gathering around the desk, and everyone's curious what's going on. And it turns out the floater that been found by the couple in the sea had been identified as Janet McRither. She's an ex-police officer, support staff. A support staff who's just left the police few months prior to start a new life. She's gonna get married, and the news spreads through the police that she died. Obviously investigated by a different team, and when Roy learns about it, he's going to see if he can gather any info on that one, though there's no suggestion that it is linked to any of the investigation the superintendent and his team dealing with, yet it's one of their own. He's gonna have to know about it. We check back with this later. The evening has come, and Skunk had located the MG, a nice MG GT 160, blue. It's parked in the North Lane district of town. He phones Becker, the cop, tells him he's got the car. Becker tells him to wait for an hour or two until he can gather his colleague and they can get to the scene. Then he can steal the car. They're going to follow him to Spiker's garage. They wait until Skunk makes the deal. Then he can go away, and then the cops would descend on the gang of car thieves. Skunk eventually waits for 2 hours, making out with his girlfriend, actually having sex with her in the car, in her car, hidden away, streets away from the MG they spotted, when the detective turns up, gives him the go-ahead. Skunk sends the girlfriend away, goes near the MG, breaks into it, sits in there. Its alarm goes off, but he dismantles it very quickly, he disables it very quickly, and Cleo Morley runs out of her building, but she couldn't stop front of it because there was no parking space, so she has to circle around the building and sees Skunk starting up her car. She's shouting, "That's my car, you bastard! Where you take her?" Suddenly the car burst into flames from the inside. Skunk burning in it. The officer who made a deal with him runs there. Cleo tries helping. They manage to drag Skunk out of the car. He suffers some serious burns. The car's burnt out from the inside. A shocking scene to see in the night. And eventually firefighters manage to put the flames out. The car gets stowed away, and obviously an investigation will start. Eventually Roy Grace arrives back to Cleo's, hears about this, and well, they don't sleep a wink, even though the next day will start really early for them again. Hey, we're on Brighton location, or nearby actually, because, well, I'll speak about it in a sec, but behind me here, there's supposed to be Cleo Morley's block of apartments, converted building that used to be some sort of factory yard, and trying to explain why her address will be uncertain. But it's certainly in this area, or could be just the end of the road, which we will walk at a point, which we will walk in a minute. But I doubt that, and I'll explain why. So I will call this Cleo Morley's house, or her apartment. both because of matching descriptions and both because of convenience. As you can see, it's a huge building, used to be some sort of warehouse and factory combination. It got converted to apartments. Here's the gates with some entry phone and another one. And the road you approach it from. There's the gate and this is the road. As you can see, more gates, and all along you would have a few of these. We cannot really be certain which one she would use. Cleo, I mean, but it's beside the point probably. The scaffolding's a bit in the way. Otherwise, yeah, I like to think she lives in one of these apartments. Just at the end of this road, which is actually Robert Street, there's another few buildings that could come into play. Like these are buildings that seem to be converted, and they could have roof terrace as well, as we know that her apartment has one. Yet, as you see, it has drive-in parking spaces, and as it's clearly stated, it's not that enough. She doesn't find parking space near her flat. She has to go around the building and park her cars, park her MG outside, so skunk can approach it. And this fact basically tells us that if she lived here, she would have a private space to park in, so she wouldn't leave the car outside. That's why I eliminate this place. So yeah, we'll call this street Cleo Morley Street, and her apartment, I would guess it's one of these, but probably right in the front of the building, just off the library, a few minutes, not even a minute maybe, walking distance. On this side of her building, yeah, we're just on a parallel street. There's shops and businesses here, and she circled this building to park her car. We don't go back to the gate, but just to the street, so you can get a bearing of where we are. Again, just around this corner. So yeah, this huge building had to be circled at night, and she would park her car behind the block probably, where skunk would find her little blue MG, and while trying to steal it, gets burned. Yeah, we were on Brighton location by Cleo Morley's apartment block. Let's get back to the deep dive. Roy Grace goes to headquarters, 5:30 in the morning, he's awake, not that he slept too much. Cleo was all shaken up because of the incident with the car. Glenn Branson and Nick Nichol is dealing with Bishop. They charge him for the murder of Katie Bishop and Sophia Harrington as well, apparently. So they're at the magistrate court. They're at the Brighton court, dealing with the solicitors, getting the approvals for the charge from the judges, and basically doing the legal stuff. 2 o'clock, there's a hearing. Roy Grace will have to attend. and formally charge the person. Eventually, he will get taken to the jail. Obviously, Roy seeks information from the autocrime unit of the police, and he speaks to investigators about Cleo's vehicle, what happened there. It's early doors, as they say, yet they understand that actually it wasn't about a malfunction of the car, because they realize that they were a setup. Someone rigged that car and made sure it's gonna burn, and the obvious is obvious that whoever did that, their target was Cleo Morley. When the 2 o'clock court hearing is over at the magistrate court and Brian Bishop is officially now charged, all the paperwork is done. As Roy Grace leaves the court, Brian Bishop talks to him. "Superintendent, you can't do that, you must believe me. Search for the real killer. It wasn't me, it wasn't me." Roy Grace walks away, but in his head he's thinking that the plea the man was saying, it was just something was not right about this, it's not a guilty man maybe, but all the evidences, the nullified alibi, everything's against him. But Roy keeps this in mind and is deep in thought as he heads back to headquarters. Once he's there, he's getting ready for the briefing and some paperwork to be done about the case, and basically he's gonna prepare the case for the trial. And just before the 6:30 evening briefing of the joint briefing, he gets caught up by Brendan Dugan, who's leading the investigation of Operation Mistral, Sophie Harrington's case. He's got some concerns about Bishop's phone signals and CCTV footage they'd located in the meantime of him, and he'd like to discuss these with Roy Grace. So they sit down and scrutinize the evidence that had come to light in the recent hours. Now the CCTV footage, 3 of them, spot Bishop in 3 different parts of town. One is at the junction of Dukes Lane and Ship Street, which is just up the road, a minute walk from Hotel du Vin. The other footage shows him near St. Peter's Church on London Road, which is a bit of a distance, and the third one sees him by the Brighton Pier, which he had claimed in the interview that he used to walk around that area with his wife, and he went there to reminisce and gather his thoughts, and for the memory's sake, really, in reflection of what had happened, he walked around there and just needed some air. The other concerning clues are coming from his mobile phone data. The mobile signals logged by the towers a cell phone would communicate with, even in standby, and the call logs have arrived from service providers. And looking at these, Dugan explains that they found discrepancies, strange ones as well, from the golf course where we first see him, Bishop, where Nick Nicol and Glenn Branson first meet him with the bad news of the death of his wife. It is consistent what Bishop had said. His mobile signals travelled from Notting Hill, the area where his flat is in London, to the Brighton golf course so far in the given time early in the morning. Then, on the 4th, on Friday, when he disappears from the Hotel du Vin, his mobile signals indicate that he had actually travelled to the Lansdowne Hotel. And that is confirmed by the Streamliner taxicab company. And Mark Tuckwell, the driver, also confirms it. Right about 2:30 in the afternoon, when he picked him up. And his mobile signals show that he actually had to pass Miss Harrington's residence, then double back and go to the pier, even though his mobile phone been switched off for some amount of time. But really, it just doesn't make sense that Bishop would do this sort of loop, make himself visible, but then think about switching off the mobile. But that's not all. More discrepancies come to light. Further problems come up with the alibi and these phone logs. And DC Corbin, who set up a timeline about Bishop's movements in the last few days and the day of the murders, each of them, points out all these little details that the police managed to gather not only CCTVs and phone records, but a witness as well. A witness who claims to have seen Brian Bishop around Sophie Harrington's house around 8 o'clock. And that is a damning evidence, because the witness had recognized him from photos. But the problem is the CCTVs, because it seems that the more CCTV footage got gathered around town, the less time it would have given Brian Bishop to do the murder. Further witnesses, like a bartender, verifies he had an espresso and a beer in a seaside bar. Another person verifies him entering the Lansdowne Hotel. All in all, he would have had some 14 minutes to murder Sophie Harrington. That the cops don't believe this. Not with all the drilling in her back and do that, then change clothes because it must have been really bloody. And now they have some serious problems that they understand, that maybe they arrested and charged the wrong man. Straight out of this ad hoc meeting, Roy Grace goes to another department of the police. And this other unit is the scientific support management. And he's looking for Brian Cook. Brian Cook is the main guy there. And Roy quizzes him about twins. Yes, twins. Roy has this idea that the guy couldn't have been in two places at once. And he learns the only difference identical twins have are the fingerprints. The DNA would be the same though. With this in mind, Roy Grace finds this whole case turned upside down. After having learned about the DNA, he's gonna have to obtain the birth certificate of Brian Bishop. He phones Leighton Lloyd and asks about his client's birth certificate. Brian Bishop tells that it's in his house on Dyke Road Avenue in a filing cabinet. It's being late night and no official buildings will be open. It's not much to do about it, but Roy Grace sends for it and it will get obtained by the morning. Besides it's being real late night, there's not much to be done officially. All the offices will be shut. The birth certificate cannot be looked any closer at this very point. So Roy Grace finally goes home. But we'll wake up early again and start the day. In the morning, Roy Grace finds a brown envelope that Bella Moy provided with Brian's birth certificate in it. With the birth certificate, there's another paper that's an adopted child certificate. So Brian Bishop is adopted. Our superintendent is studying the birth certificate early in the morning. And he will have to call a post-adoption counselor to find out if Brian Bishop had a twin. But it's too early for that. He's going to have to wait until after the briefing. Straight after the morning briefing, he phones the post-adoption counselor. And in a phone conversation, he learns that because on Brian Bishop's birth certificate, the exact time of birth is being marked, that means he has a twin. Not long after, Nick Nichol is dispatched to seek information in the Brighton Reference Library. looking up the origins of parents, and if there's any information at all in Brighton about Brian Desmond Bishop's twin and his parents. Nick Nicole, good, sharp detective, finds a little well of information in the library, in the local history of families and people. He manages to track down the original parents. So he decides to walk to the town hall and see if he can get any further information to provide to Roy Grace. But soon enough, he will be introduced to a long, long red tape when it comes to social systems in Brighton and Hove. So he will eventually phone his boss, and Roy Grace will accompany him, and they will dive deep into all sorts of bureaucratic things. Hey, sorry for the strange interruption. I'd just like to note that at one point in the future, and I'm in no rush doing it yet, but I will return to this particular book in more details. I'd like to flesh out some scenes and certain aspects I would like to look into a bit deeper. I will do a touch of research about some topics regarding this book. And yes, I would like to widen the scrutiny of this volume of the Roy Gray series. Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, because I found this particular book has loads of interesting little bits and pieces in it worth talking about, but I don't want to make this video extra long. So yes, I will skip certain minute details, as I have before in this video actually, deliberately, but we'll get back to it at one point in time. Like I said, no rush, but keep an eye on it if you're interested. Now let's get back to the normal deep dive. Roy and Nick are waiting considerable time to find out any information from the adoption services, social services, and loads of phone calls are made. Eventually, a woman turns up and they learn the name of Bishop's twin. His birth name that Nick Nicole had already dug up from the microfilms in the reference library, and finally this woman provides them with the names of the parents who adopted him, Derek and Joanna Tripwell. With no further information, Roy and Nick Nicole ask, what's with the address? Where do they live? And this social services woman just declines straight up to have anything else given to them. The woman claims that it could be shocking for a person to learn that they'd been adopted, and already they have too much information. Roy Grace is really pissed off, just as Nick Nicole. But not wasting any more time, they leave the building. Roy goes to visit Emma Jane Baltwood in the Royal Sussex County Hospital. See how she's doing. When he gets there, he realizes that she'd put in a ward full of really ill people, some are mentally disturbed. There's a guy whose dick's hanging out and makes a right riot on the ward, but eventually manages to get her moved. Then he presents her with the flowers he brought around. Has a little chit chat with her, reassures her that the team is waiting for her, and wish their best to her. Anyhow, after comforting her a little bit, he leaves, and he has places to go, things to do obviously. As he steps into the elevator, he sees this doctor, Raj Singh, according to his name tag, works on ENA. and they do small talk, and the doctor asks him if they met before. He eventually figures out that he's a detective and probably had seen him in the news. They have a little chit chat, and Roy Grace learns that recently on the E&A there was a scene caused by some weird dude who came in with a hand injury. Roy Grace gets perked up, really interested in this hand injury. And according to the description, this guy had a beard, shades on, cap, and he doesn't really recall his face, but assures Roy that they have CCTV in the A&E. So Roy goes to find the CCTV monitoring room to obtain a copy of the footage they may have. And just as Roy Grace gets back in a while to the police headquarters, obviously he had made some phone calls, Pamela Buckley phones, and she had located the only Tripwells who live nearby in Guildford. Roy turns around and goes to Guildford to speak to the elderly couple. But the couple say it was claimed that they'd been born with an illness and one of the twins died at the age of 21. Roy Grace is not sure what to think of this, and looking at the pictures in the couple's house, this child resembles Brian Bishop. He goes back to headquarters finally and inquires at the post-adoption offices and speaks to Loretta Liebernight, a post-adoption counselor, and learns that back in the days in the 60s, social workers didn't really like to separate twins, but if one had been born ill and no one was sure if they're going to survive, they actually lied that the twin died. And if the twin in question survived, it would be adopted by different parents also would know as the other half died. The A&D footage that Roy had obtained earlier, they see this bearded man, sunglasses and baseball cap on, but the high-tech crime unit guys managed to alter the picture to remove the beard, take off the hat, and they see it's Brian Bishop. But he couldn't have been there because Brian Bishop had been seen on the CCTVs. And then Branson tells a tired Roy that being at the E&E, this guy might have given his real name and address to the register you have to fill, just in case they need to call you back or further treatment. So Glenn goes back to the hospital with the picture in his hand, and he's going to inquire about the logs they have of the day when the hand had been treated and the scene were closed. Obviously he's going to have to talk to Roy, the doctor, as well, and he is on duty, and eventually they manage to figure out about a bite mark because Dr. Singh does not believe that the hand wound being caused by a taxi cab door being slammed on it. Before Branson makes it back to headquarters, Roy Grace has a few minutes, so he goes and looks into what's going on with the Janet McRither murder or death, the floater, the body, the colleague who'd been found in the sea by the couple. He goes to her ex-division and speaks to a colleague who replaced her, and Roy Grace knows this colleague as well. Obviously they work in the same building, and they have a little chit-chat, and this lady tells Roy that Miss McRither, she was the only one who had authority to look into the log files or create one or change them. The log files of the police that would put criminal records on, and Roy pursues her to take a look, say, what was the last thing Janet had done on the log files. And it turns out that the last thing she's done had altered Bishop's criminal records, put all sorts of stuff on it from young age, apparently sexual assault, fight, and the modifications date that's been in the system matches the date when Janet McRither had come to work the very last time. Also, this colleague tells Roy that there'd be rumors that Janet had a new boyfriend and they were gonna move away to Australia and start a new life, and she'd be really excited about it, Janet being. Roy realizes it must be this very same person, this date, the lover, who Sophie must have had the modified Bishop records, the murder. It does not look really good, because now, potentially, the body count had just jumped onto 3. Roy's all excited about these things and rushes back to his office when his phone rings. It's Glenn Branson. And finally, he says he's got the records from the hospital. He'd spoken to Dr. Singh and he showed around the CCTV footage, went into the hand treatment logs, and they'd found a different name. It was not Brian Bishop that got looked, and a different address on Sackville Road. And that's not Brian Bishop's address. Branson's investigation in the hospital with the records reveals that the real name of the perpetrator is Norman Jacks. So immediately they organize a hit on the address, so the police will descend on this Sackville Road house and see what they find. Cleo Morley's late night again, getting ready to chill, waiting for the superintendent to turn up for the late date, when she hears noises around the house. Before she knows what happens, she gets attacked. Roy's talking to her on the phone at one point, but she never gets back to Roy, and Roy's getting agitated now. In the meantime, they're heading for the action on Sackville Road to see who this A&D person was. And by the time they get there, they find some real crazy stuff in the house, with a room, a closet separated, with computers in it, monitors in it, and there's pictures and scrapbooks and cutouts on the wall, articles about the people who'd been murdered. But really concerning, there's a photo of Cleo Morley as well. And we are at the title hunt. We arrive to the point in the story where in the book the title gets said. It's in chapter 116, towards the very end of the chapter, few lines of the conversation, and it's said by Roy Grace. Dead men don't do any of these things either, Branson said, do they? Not in my experience, no. So how come we have one who does? After some moments, Grace replied, because he's not dead enough. So we have successfully found the only place where the title is said in the book. Let's get back to the plot breakdown. Grace doesn't wait any longer. He can't contact Cleo. So on the double, he drives over to her place. In the meantime, the Time Billionaire's place reveals data, reveals clues about his further stuff. And there is a storage unit, locker unit, that he'd rented. So some of the police go there as well. In Jack's storage unit, they find several strange items, like the cloned license plates identical to Brian Bishop's Bentleys, and a Jaguar, an old Jaguar in pristine condition that seemingly he'd fixed up. And they find books, manuals for MG cars, really detailed ones, and a key cutting machine, blank keys, a little workshop basically. While Roy Grace is on his way to Cleo Morley, Cleo is fighting because this dude turns up and is all dressed up in coveralls, green coveralls with the gas mask on, and he's attacking Cleo. They have a fight, but just in time, as Cleo runs up to her terrace the roof terrace, and manages to lock out the guy. The police arrive, Roy Gray's called back up, and they all get there. By the gate they meet Cleo's neighbour. He lets the police in, and knocking on Cleo's door, they hear alter action in there, shouts, screams. Roy Gray smashes a window in, climbs in, and goes up the stairs and confronts the man in the gas mask. They start to have a fight, they roll down the stairs, the guy disappears once the police back up, gain entry to the flat, to the apartment, and Roy gives him a chase. And now a quiet, long foot chase ensues, and Roy Grace is right after the gas masked man, the time billionaire as we know him as readers, and there's the chase going on. This foot chase goes on all along in the back streets, in the dark, from Cleo's house out to a main road, through the high street, all the way to Preston Park train station, where they corner the time millionaire. But he jumps on a train, catches the railing at the end, but Roy Grace manages to get the train stopped in time by the conductor who just let it go, and the time billionaire jumps on the rails and he starts to run on the rail tracks, falls over, breaks his leg. Roy goes near to the platform and sees the man lying there, moving still, crawling. Suddenly the conductor shouts at him, "The train, the express train is coming!" And they realize that there are headlights. Roy jumps down onto the tracks, careful to avoid the live one, and drags the time millionaire off, who suffers one injury. His hand gets cut off by the train. But that was a close call. He survives, and so does Roy. After all this excitement and the apprehension of Jax, Jax gets taken to hospital, and Roy goes back to Cleo to spend the night there. But early in the morning, he would go to the hospital to talk to Jax. And there, the guy speaks, and he tells tales of misery about his childhood, how he hated Bishop because he had everything. He was born with the silver spoon in his mouth, and he was given, well, jack shit. And he basically was driven by anger, and in part, the anger was based on his idea that got stolen by Bishop, by Brian Bishop. So he says. Through along the book earlier, in a form of diary, in Jax's headspace, we learn that he invented a software that would make bookings and make finding rooms and spaces easier, so when a plane gets delayed or can't take off, then all you have to do is log into a software that will be connected to all the reservation softwares in the hotels, and in a second you could find empty rooms, so you could sort out places the passengers to sleep. And this could be done in all sorts of walks of life. That was his idea, and seemingly Brian Bishop stole his idea, but we never really get to find out if it's true or not. Maybe it's only a delusion in his head. Eventually we find out that McRither, Janet McRither, the staff lady of the CID who worked for the police, got murdered by Jax as well, and the senior investigation officer gets called by Roy, and Roy provides him with the clues and evidence that would link Jax to her murder. Therefore this case can be closed too. Yet Brian Bishop may be given bail in a day or two, but cannot yet be released as investigation is pending and there are questions. And when Roy speaks to Jax in the hospital, Jax claims how he hated his family, his parents, though Roy says he'd spoken to the elderly couple and he'd found them quite decent people. But Jax claims that his parents had died, his adoptive parents, the parents who adopted him. Roy is not sure what he means by this and decides to go and look a bit closer into the situation. So he does visit the library as well, goes through the August newspapers, the old issues in the 60s, and he finds a car crash, an accident where a mother dies and miraculously twins who she's pregnant with survive. From here, Roy goes back to the post-adoption counselors and speak to this geezer there. They bring out the old book that has the birth in it, and suddenly they find that the bishops were triplets. With this, they realize that one of the twins had really died, as it's been claimed by social workers back in the days, and two survived because all three of them had been in an incubator, but two of them had strong system enough to survive, while the third one died. But it never could have been found out, as the mother died as well. After learning all this, Roy can start to work toward closing the case and make sure it gets prepared for a trial, and he's quite satisfied now. He has all the answers, he has all the pieces in the puzzle. And as a last port of call, as he talks to Branson, he tells him that he's got a meeting in the town hall, in the council, 3 o'clock. He's going to see this woman who was not really helpful and didn't look up the files properly. Therefore, they never had learned earlier about the triplets. And Roy, as he puts it, he's gonna hang her out to dry. And after that, he's going to call it a day. And we're going to call this the conclusion of the story. So, that's it for now regarding this story. But I have not spoken about it enough yet. So, not that enough, this book will be revisited at one point in time. I'm in no rush doing it, as I mentioned it in the video, but if you're interested, keep an eye on the channel. It will come back. The title will come back in a different video, shorter one, because I'd like to mention some scenes, like to analyze certain happenings in the book that I think you might find interesting. And another thing about this book, as it's a bit different from many of Peter James's Roy Grace volumes. First of all, it plays in a shorter span of time, only a few days. It's really complex, detailed, and let's say it's a very good example for a police procedural thriller. And the other thing, this is the book I call a health whodunit. Later on in the series, we will find a whodunit book in the Roy Grace stories. This one is the health whodunit, I'd like to call, because I don't think the idea of the author, Peter James, was to hide the identity of the killer. More like the idea was to keep us guessing, was it really Bishop? Because we fairly early realized that there's gotta be twins. It takes Roy half the book, but in reality, maybe, well, in reality within the story, obviously, reality within the fiction, it takes him like, what, 48 hours? As a reader, it took me maybe, I don't know, 200 pages when I first read it. So yeah, I don't think it was meant to be a whodunit, but it is a semi-whodunit. I kind of dig that in this story. But yeah, anyway, we're going to be checking back on this one later. In the meantime, that's now enough of this video. Signing off now. Catch you later.